Alright. May this reading relax your mind and awaken your heart. In London, Gary and I explored Piccadilly Circus among acid heads, potheads, and seekers of peace, all dressed in flamboyant attire. Hippies rapped, drug pushers and people whom sell their bodies solicited, bobbies scrutinized, skinheads growled, and tourists snapped photos of the bizarre scene. On Lambeth Road, across from the river of the British Parliament, we met a Catholic priest who sympathized with young travelers. Each night at 9, he opened the stone basement of his church for young people to sleep on the floor for free. We had to leave at 9 in the morning, and nothing was provided but the cold, hard floor. Still, it was a place to crash, and travelers brought their own sleeping bags. Finding a spot on the floor every night, I maneuvered through this room, packed with unwashed bodies, the air thick with the smell of hashish. When the lights were put out, it got very dark. Soon I would begin to hear the sounds of couples, you know what, moaning and rolling around. Sometimes I caught sight of people lighting little candles in the far corners of the room, strapping off their arms and shooting heroin in the candlelight. There are some intense themes in this book, just letting you know. It's a spiritual book though, so it goes somewhere, don't worry. Affected by this atmosphere, I smoked hashish and marijuana more than ever before. On the surface, I began to fit in more with the crowd, but while those around me socialized, I retreated within myself. I often found myself wondering why I was bothering to indulge at all. Often, after Gary, my friend, had gone in to find his sleeping place, I would sit, sometimes for hours, on the banks of the River Thames. The massive sheet of flowing water had a hypnotic effect on my mind, and I would question the life I was leading. I looked up at the relentless hands of Big Ben and wondered if I was just wasting my time. Another part of me felt a dire need to prove to myself once and for all that I could break out of my shyness and just enjoy life like never before. For one thing, here I was, 19, and I had never had a girlfriend. In my shyness, I had always been more comfortable listening to music in my room or hanging out with friends than I was on dates. Many propositions had come to me, but I shied away, fearing I might lose my freedom, or even worse, break a nice girl's heart. But all around me now, other guys were bragging about their conquests, so to speak. I was sick of being different. I met some girls trying to make the scene, quote unquote, and flirted more seriously than ever. Still, my efforts felt empty. A force within me was dragging me away from it all. Battling against that inner force, I was determined to be victorious, to experience firsthand the unrestricted pleasures glorified by society. Was it the Lord in my heart I was fighting? Yes, I silently boasted, and I'm winning the battle. But late at night, when I came back to the river, gazing down into the current, I felt ashamed. I was winning, but I felt lost. One evening, I closed my eyes and sat in silent meditation among a sea of pigeons in Trafalgar Square. Encircled by shouting children, chattering tourists, and the honking evening traffic, I felt I was connected to a universe within myself far more substantial than anything around me. Taking a deep breath, I smiled. My conception of my body seemed to evaporate, and I felt my mind merging into an ocean of peace. By comparison, My attempts at gaining sensual pleasure or overcoming my natural introspection seemed irrelevant. Opening my eyes, I visualized downtown London transfiguring into a beautiful family made up of marble lions, Lord Nelson on his column, and all the pigeons, tourists, businessmen, shoppers, and beggars. I strolled across the street and was given a cup of barley soup and a bread slice from a church charity, which I relished along with the homeless. Then, with sincere reverence, I entered the church, St. Martin's of the Fields, where I sat on a wooden pew and absorbed myself in reading the Holy Bible. There, a particular passage struck my heart. Lord Jesus instructed his followers, "Come out from among men and be separate." I pondered this. Why should I waste my life trying to fit in with the social fashions of my peers? Why not try to live on my own terms, and hopefully someday on God's terms? Traveling by ferry across the English Channel, Gary and I disembarked in a city in France named Calais. Calais. I wouldn't know how to pronounce if someone didn't tell me. Please tell me. It was a sunny day with birds warbling in delicately formed trees. Fine grasses and lush pastures yielded to the gentle wind. We relished our freedom. Now we could go wherever we pleased. "Hey monk, where to next? Your wish is my command." Gary's green eyes glistened with adventure as we stood on the side of a country road in western France. "The world is at your beck and call." From the back pocket of his jeans, he pulled a tattered map of Western Europe and pointed to various places. Morocco, Spain, Paris, Rome, Switzerland, Germany. Where? "Where would you like to go, Gary?" I asked. "Everywhere. But in which order? That's the question." Thinking for a moment, I remembered the streams I so often studied and stretched my arms toward the sky. "We should surrender our destiny to the will of God," I said. Gary laughed, threw down his backpack, and sat on it. Mimicking my gesture, he responded, "What does that mean?" "What would you like it to mean?" I asked. Gary mockingly joined his palms in prayer. "You spend your days studying scriptures and meditating while I'm hanging out." Again, stretching his arms to the sky, he said, "You decide how we should surrender our destiny to the will of God." Plucking a yellow wildflower from the ground, I declared, "Like this." "You want us to sit here forever like that flower?" he asked. "Look, Gary, from a small seed buried in the dirt, this flower has grown into what it is, a beautiful blossom basking in the sunshine. How? By surrendering her destiny to the will of God." "You win, brother, but how does your fancy poetry translate into a hitchhiker's language?" I smelled the flower and had an idea. Whenever a car stops for us, what are the first words they always ask? "You play the role of the driver, and I'll be us." Gary shrugged his shoulders. "Hello, where are you going?" "Where are you going?" "To Casablanca," he said, pretending to steer a car. I clapped my hands. "Perfect. That's exactly where we are going." Handing him the flower, I asked, "What do you think, Gary? Every time we stand on the side of the road, our destiny will be a mystery to be revealed by the next ride." Leaping up, Gary patted me on the back and exclaimed, "That's it. Wherever a ride is going, that's where we'll go." He cast the wildflower into the wind. Days later, after passing through villages and towns, we found ourselves on the outskirts of Paris, or Paris. As we came closer to the city, we burned with anticipation. The Louvre, the Eiffel Tower, magnificent monuments, palaces, and cafes were only a few miles away. But faith had other plans for us. The first ride we got took us to Geneva, Switzerland, where we were soon meditating at the shore of a placid crescent-shaped lake. At a youth hostel, we shared a dormitory with about 25 others. One of our roommates, named Jim, had recently been honorably discharged from the U.S. Army. Jim had a fascination for books on Eastern mysticism, and we spent hours talking. He was lean, strong, and eager for adventure, having been cooped up in the army for several years. One day, out of curiosity, Jim asked, "Monk, with the Vietnam War raging, how is it that you never got drafted?" I told him how the draft board had accidentally typed the wrong birth date onto my records. Later, when the draft lottery was held and the nation watched, sitting on pins and needles, they pulled out one birth date after another. The early draws were the first to be drafted. My actual birth date came up at the beginning of the draft, but the mistaken one was drawn near the end, and those called later were never called to service. Jim looked out into the sky, rubbed his chin, shook his head, and mused for a minute, then remarked, "Maybe it wasn't the draft board's mistake. Maybe God has other plans for you." Jim invited Gary and I to come with them through Italy on his way to Morocco, and we agreed. Near Genoa, the city of Christopher Columbus, we loaded into his Volkswagen Beetle with all the money he'd accumulated in the military, including electronics he'd planned to sell for profit in the U.S. Terraced hills gave way to the Mediterranean Sea. Afternoon sunshine played on deep blue waters, and we took a break to swim. When we got back to the Beetle, to Jim's horror, everything inside was gone. We went down to the police station to file a report, and matters got even worse. To our shock, the police, shouting and jabbering their fingers in our faces, shoved us into a prison cell. As the heavy steel door slammed shut, a chill ran up my spine. Their chief approached us. "You have two choices," he barked. "Remain in jail or get out of town and never return." Of course, we chose the latter. In the darkness of night, a squad car with red lights flashing on the roof escorted us up to the city limits. That was our first day in Italy. We drove until morning, when we reached a telegraph office. Jim contacted his comrades in Germany, who wired him gas fare to return to his military base. Again, Gary and I were on our own. We stood on the roadside wondering what was next. "Hey, Monk, do you think we're bad luck? First Frank and now Jim. Whoever tries to help us loses everything." "I don't know, Gary. Maybe there's a reason for all of this." Gary looked back down at the road from where we came. "Do you really think there's a reason for everything?" "Yes. I believe there must be a beautiful plan behind it all." Gary nodded. "I also believe." With that, we stuck out our thumbs and waited to see what fate had planned for us next. That's the end of the second chapter, and with that, we'll pause our reading of the journey home there for now. But thank you, my dear listeners, for listening with me. Namaste.